Courtney is our amazing agricultural admin. Oh, look at that. I see some people. That's Courtney. She's here to help out because Zoom always has problems. So I'm Jason Detzel. I'm a livestock educator from Ulster County Extension. I own a cattle ranch in Hudson, New York. And we are here to talk about rotational grazing. Courtney, would you like to say anything?
Welcome, everyone. We're happy that you made it here.
Cool. Hi, Carrie. I'm just going to go around the room real quick. Everyone can just say hello, what they're up to, what their deal is, and what's going on. So Elizabeth, you're the first one on my screen. What's going on? Tell us a little about yourself and farming.
I'm just interested to learn more about, for future knowledge.
Do you have any cattle now?
No, not now.
It's no big deal. This is a great place to start. And so where are you? Where are you? What state?
New York.
Okay, where?
Orange County.
Oh, okay, cool. So I cover Orange County too. So if you need anything, I can come down and see you down there with permission. So Carrie, good to see you again. It's been a couple of years. Do you want to tell us what, I know you have cattle now in Southern Mass, right?
Yeah, good to see you too. I have a herd of 8 cattle in by Cape Cod in Southern Mass, all belted Galloways, and we rotated them through our pasture last year, but I know there's like a way more effective way to do it. So we're excited to learn and get disciplined this year.
Yeah, you don't have a lot of land, right?
We have like 7, I guess only 7 acres of agricultural land. And then we have tons of potential like silvopasture eventually, which would be cool. But
I emailed you back about that, right? About the master.
Yeah.
Okay, cool.
Yeah. We had a forester come yesterday. So we've been working with him for like a while. So yeah, I'll email you back after.
Okay, yeah. Because cattle will ruin your trees, especially your most expensive ones. If you're going to run them in the forest, make sure you have a registered forester come. In New York State, it's actually free. A master forester will come to your land, assess your land, then you can have a logger come in, sustainably log it, replant it, then run the animals through there. So, Ruddy Rock, what's up? Hi.
Hi. Sorry, I got booted there for a second.
That's all right. This is all recorded, so don't worry about it.
So I'm located in Ellenville, New York. We have a little under 17 acres. I have a urban farming market garden background. I've been running that for a little over a decade, and I'm transitioning into real farming, not urban farming, but land. My partner is a butcher who is a charcuterie butcher by trade. So we are hoping to eventually focus more on pork and poultry. But this will be our first season on this property. So we're still putting doorknobs on doors. So
I will come out and see you. They've allowed farm visits as of this week. So maybe
that's awesome. Yes.
Next week. So I'll get in touch.
Thank you.
And who's Ma?
It's MA.
MA.
Okay. Yes.
What's going on with you?
Just looking for some tips. Been rotational grazing for 15, 20 years, something like that. And so, I never studied it, just did it. So
this is perfect for all of you then. This really is great. I guarantee you're going to learn a bunch here. So MA, is that your name?
It's Milton Arthur.
Milton Arthur. Okay, Milton.
Yep.
Arthur. Nice to meet you guys. Nice to meet all of you. So here's how it's going to work. This is not something we're going to do 4 hours of talking here as a team, as a group. Today is going to be theoretical and conceptual. Today is a day you sit by. Oh, wait, sorry. Hold on one second. Carrie, who's sitting on the couch over there? Who's that?
I'm Tim.
Hey, Tim. Nice to meet you. And you're Carrie's partner?
Yeah.
Okay. And you're involved in this business also?
Yep.
Cool.
Yeah, my sister is actually she just finished vet school, so she's been helping us out a lot as well. So
cool. More the merrier. We're always happy to help. Okay. Tonight's the theoretical stuff. I'm going to run through a ton of stuff. Just let it wash over you. I'm going to send you the PDF of this. You can go through this as many times as you want. I'm going to send you an entire list of resources. I'm going to send you a bunch of videos to watch because we don't have time to watch all these great videos that I've dug up over the years. So like I said, don't go crazy taking notes. Just think about it. This is a conversation, not a lecture. If something comes up, you need clarification. If you need to make a point or ask the question, just do it. Unmute yourself, or that's the easiest way because I can't always check the chat box, and let's talk about it, okay? So The next time we meet is going to be the nuts and bolts of what we're doing. So tonight we're going to talk about how we do it. Next time we're going to talk about what we use to do it. So next one will be fencing and water systems, which is a huge thing. And we're going to talk a lot about that, minerals, stuff like that. This one is more holistic management grazing. That's what I call this one. Okay. Let's get in because we actually don't have that much time, surprisingly. Okay. Courtney, can you see my screen?
Yes, sir.
Great. Okay. Look at that picture. That's beautiful. Oh my God. Okay. We're not going to watch this video. I'm going to send it to you in the mail. It's a great video called Soil Carbon Cowboys, about a bunch of ranchers that were ranching in a typical, conventional fashion, and were losing money over and over again, like many ranchers and farmers in the US. And they switched to these systems and everything changed. And these are the old salts. These are the people that you wouldn't expect to ever change, that typically you think don't like to listen to others. But when you watch this video, it's going to change your mind and break some of the stereotypes you have about older farmers, I think. What the heck are we doing here? Why are we using rotational grazing? It's pretty simple. We're using this because this is what sustains grass. It's what makes our grass healthy. This is literally how the grasslands developed. You take there were millions of buffalo back in the day. You take 1 million buffalo and they sweep through the plains. They spend one day at a time on one spot. They decimate that area and they don't come back for another year. That is our model. You look at Africa with the desertification, and I'm going to bring some more videos about that too. Alan Savory, if you're not familiar with that, in the 70s and 80s, Mr. Savory and his cohorts killed 77 or something thousand elephants because they thought the desertification, the process of ruining grass and making it desert, was caused by the ruminants overeating. It couldn't have been more further from the truth, and he'll be the first one to tell you it was dead wrong. Ruminants are an integral part of any grassland system. They make grass, they don't destroy it when they have enough to use it responsibly. We're going to talk more about that, okay? The way this really improves, and like everything else, like things have been coming out of our body, I'm a grass farmer. I run cattle, but I'm not a farmer or a rancher. I'm a grass farmer. I grow forage to feed animals. That's why I like cattle. If I have 100 pigs, I got to buy their feed, bring it to them, feed it out, and all that stuff. That's materials handling. The way I've evolved as a rancher is I want to be a grazer. I want to be out there every day on the ground. I want to see the cattle, and I want to grow really good grass and to eat because that's free. So my point is we're feeding the soil biota just like you're feeding all the little guys in your stomach and intestines too. You have to keep that soil web healthy if you're going to have healthy animals. We're going to talk a lot more about that. I do want to mention something though too. All of us are in the Northeast. Pastures are not natural. You cannot really find pastures in nature out here because it doesn't exist. We have very quick successional species in the form of woody trees and stuff that come in very quickly. So always realize you are really running an unnatural system in some regard in this area, okay? This is where it gets a little hippie, and it's really important to understand this because this really hit me when I got this. There's 3 kinds of energy transfer in this type of high intensity grazing. We're going to excite the soil biota. We're going to literally drop tons of manure, tons of urine, tons of dead skin cells, dead bugs that follow them, and the soil biota is going to go nuts. Nature craves disturbance. When you give it to it, it responds great, but it has to have rest to respond correctly. So you're going to excite the soil biota, everything that's in there, during the growing season. Literally the kinetic energy from hoof impacts, from running, from playing, from digging holes, from bushing their head in, also excites soil biota. They feed off that energy. The energy is around. It really is. You feel it. And there's a symbiotic aspect to that too, where the cattle bring billions of insects. They bring billions of predators in the form of birds, other insects, moles, voles, earthworms, all that stuff. And that symbiotic energy is important too. So what we're really trying to do is harness the incredible energy of multiple 1,000-pound animals to feed our ground and feed our soil biota, okay? Now, you all know there's pretty much just 2 ways to graze for the most part. There's continuous grazing and there's managed grazing. There is a time and a place for both. I would never say that continuous grazing doesn't work. It works great for some people. In fact, some people shouldn't even be rotating, in my opinion. It doesn't make sense. But in most times, rotating will make a lot of sense if you have the resources to do it. So we look at continuous grazing when you put 20 animals out on a few acres or 20 acres and leave them for the summer. It's really advantageous because it doesn't take any time. You throw them out there, you can collect them later in the year, pretty much make sure their water's full and you're done. You don't have to monitor or spend time with them. And I will say this too, if you're a farmer, if you're a rancher, you need to be seeing your animals every day. That's what being a farmer is. If it's not the best part of your day, because it's the best part of mine, I get up early, the sun's coming up, I go out, I move my cattle, it is bliss. If it's not the best part of your day, then this might not be the business for you, okay? Like anything, you have to have a real passion for it, so just keep that in mind. Disadvantages of continuous grazing are pretty obvious when you look around at your neighbors or my neighbors' paddocks. Inefficient pasture usage. You have a bunch of plants over here they won't eat and a bunch of stuff they eat every single day over and over again, which leads to overgrazing. Manure usage in dead zones by the water is all poop. Nothing can grow there. It's too trampled. It's a dead zone. Lower pasture value because most of our good plants are killed or decimated and we try to reseed every few years and it doesn't work. And it takes additional inputs. Now, let's talk about inputs for a second because farmers for the last 50 years have been sold inputs by the petrochemical industry to improve their pastures. And some of those chemicals work really well, but they aren't sustainable in the long run because they do not provide for the biota. In fact, they kill the soil biota in many instances. So in my opinion, for a sustainable future, we should be trying as best as possible to move away from petrochemicals in our agricultural lands, moving to those more sustainable things and using animals to make these impacts. Managed grazing means we're going to move the animals, it can mean anything. It just means we're not going to leave them in one place for a long time. It promotes productivity. We can get a lot more time out of the growing season. So we're going to talk about stockpile grazing, stockpile forage, which is how I feed my cattle over the winter. But to give you a quick example of that, the first year I cattle, I think I had like 10 cows and I fed like 40 bales of hay over the winter. By the third year was stockpiled, I had like, 40 cows and I only fed like 10 bales. So I'll get into that, but it is possible to really make a big cut into your feed bill. The biggest bill you have is going to be hay typically over the winter. And some of these concepts I'm going to introduce you to are going to help you do that. You can produce healthier animals. There's no doubt about it. These animals, it's natural. We're like the bison. They gotta move. If you concentrate on one place, you have dead zones, you have parasite problems, and you have lower feed quality, period, okay? The disadvantage to managed grazing is there's more planning involved. There's a ton, but I will tell you, as you get further into this process, it will be enjoyable for you. I actually kind of enjoy spreadsheets. I love making my grazing schedule for the year. It's fun to me. It's what I enjoy. And it takes time, but it's not that much time. More monitoring, but you're a farmer. Anyway, yeah. Now you're going to have to move your animals every day. You have to see every single one of them. That will be advantageous to you in the long run, but some people don't like to do that. That's not really a farmer to me. Get out there, see your animals. And it requires more capital to start up. Not a ton more, but instead of just having a square fence with animals in it, you're going to have to separate that paddock with other lines and poly wire and different water systems and stuff like that. Okay? Here are the key factors to healthy plants. Now, remember, I told you, you are all grass farmers now. Start thinking of that. The four key aspects of good quality forage and pasture are healthy plants, healthy soil, healthy animals, and then I'm going to talk about ways to injure your pastures here. Sorry, it was a little confusing. I'm sorry. Healthy pastures themselves are diverse, a mix of annual and perennials, and they're dense. This is super important, okay? I'm going to give you some sheets and homework too, by the way. Healthy pastures are diverse, they're a mix of annual and perennials, and they are dense. What does that mean? Well, a real pasture is a complex and variable stand. You look at this grass, and that's very unnatural, and it will take an incredible amount of inputs to keep it that way. But if you look in the average pasture, you're going to see a lot of different kinds of plants, both annual that grow from seed typically and come back every year and die in the winter, and perennials, which die back and come back every year. They both have their place. We don't understand it. We do not understand the succession of nature, and it always surprises me. I dare somebody to tell me what's going to come up on a square foot of my pasture. You can't. Why? Because there's a 40-year seed bank there. The seeds are viable between 20, 40, sometimes 70 years. They're there, but why don't they all grow in the year? Well, the reason is because they need the right conditions. If we give them the right conditions because we're good grass farmers, we will have really good plants grow. If we give them poor conditions, we will have over and over again successional plants, disturbance plants, AKA weeds. Healthy pastures are variable and diverse. You need a bunch of different plants to be healthy, period, okay? There's a couple different types of grasses that you can grow. There's cool season grasses, which we are inundated with up here in the Northeast, and there's warm season grasses, which are extremely difficult to grow from a perennial standpoint up here. Just our climate doesn't allow for it. And by the way, almost all of our cool season grasses are from Europe. Everything that you're buying for seed was not here until this, our pioneers from the East, or whoever came, brought it in their boats and they came here. Same with earthworms and stuff. So these are pretty new plants. The warm season grasses we have had, this is what the buffalo were eating. And when I say grass, this grass is about 8 or 10 feet tall, and it's a grass. It's crazy. So we want to try to work with both these to combat what's called the summer slump. If you look on this little graph here, we all know the green up's coming. We will green up next week, is my guess. We'll start to see green in the pastures. So we have this incredible rate of growth up until May and June, and then we have a slump. The reason we have that slump is because it gets hot. A lot of the annuals are already done. The orchard grass has already put out its seeds. It's done. Some of the other plants are done, and it just gets too hot for cool season grasses to grow. A great way to help you out is grow annuals, warm season annuals like gamma grass or switchgrass or blue stem, but they are not easy to integrate into a perennial system. So you have to really decide how you're going to do that. And that's what we'll do in the second half of the class. We're going to talk about how to best perform with what you have and what you can grow. So I don't plant anything now. I do frost seed in the winter with legumes. And what that means is I go out when there's snow on the ground and I broadcast seeds with a seed spreader. Only legumes, only clovers. What that does is it draws itself down through the snow because the seed is dark and it plants itself in the ground. And we know it doesn't have to express itself that year. It can sit in there for 20 years and be okay until the conditions are correct, okay? So I just want you to understand the types of grasses I'm talking about. Cool season, which is primarily 90% of what we're talking about, and then some warm season grasses exist. And here's some pictures here. This is orchard grass on the far right, the ones with the little balls on it. You're going to see that first. That stuff will be gone by June. It's great forage, but it comes up quick and it's a quick annual. Down here is a gamma grass, and then the other one is a blue stem. These are warm season grasses. We don't see these up here very often unless they're planted as part of an annual rotation. So don't think you're going to have gamma grass or blue stem growing in your pasture naturally. It's not going to happen. The other category of grasses is legumes. It's nitrogen fixing plants. These are your clovers, and that's what we see here in purple. This yellow one is bird's foot trefoil, which, by the way, save yourself a lot of money. You can't plant it on your ground unless you already have it. I don't know why. We don't know why, but it's very difficult to establish this. And as you move along and you decide how you want to accentuate and improve your pastures, let's keep in contact so I can help you with some of the ideas. We can look at your soil tests, we can look at what you got, and we can make a decision on what's going to grow well on your land. The purple flowers are vetch. These are all legumes. They are a complement to grass. They grab nitrogen from the air and carbon from the air, and they put it in the ground with the help of mycorrhizae and other fungi. It's amazing. If you have legumes and grass together, if you have a diverse pasture, you will have a far more productive pasture. What happens is the legumes say, I'm putting nitrogen down here. I need more. The grass says, ooh, I'll have some of that. And they steal it from the legumes. And so the legumes just keep going, pumping more and more nitrogen down in there, and the grass grows better. So if you just grow legumes, you have okay pasture. If you just grow grass, you have okay pasture. If you have diverse grass and legumes mix, and which we'll talk about, you have a really good, productive pasture. Oh, here's a great picture of this. I didn't know this was in here. So if you look at the left, that's just regular old ryegrass. In the middle, we have a clover and an annual ryegrass. I don't know what they put over here. And a crimson clover and another annual ryegrass. You see how much better these two that have the clovers are growing than the annual ryegrass there. That's what they were trying to show, that legumes mixed with grasses will grow much better than just grass alone. And it's true. The other category, we have grasses, we have legumes, and we have quote unquote forbs or weeds. There's no such thing as a weed. These are my cattle here, actually. You can see they're standing in a massive stand of goldenrod. It's incredible. Down there is chicory, which most people would consider weed, but is really not. And then plantain. These are all broadleaf forbs. Why they're different than grasses and legumes is they are typically successional species. They like disturbance. They feed off it. So those seeds are in the ground just like the grasses. But if you grind that ground up, you make a mud pit out of it, if you leave a lot of manure, if you disturb it, these are the ones that are going to come up first. And it has to happen. You have to let those, the succession happen. Again, nature runs a cycle. We can't try to cheat it out. It doesn't work. A lot of times I get folks, so in the wintertime, I always recommend you have a sacrifice paddock. You're going to have one, let's say I have 20 cows, I have all my hay there, and I'm going to have 2 acres where I leave them for the whole winter. It's going to be muddy, it's going to be destroyed, but it's also going to be a ton of manure and a ton of hay. What's going to happen the next year, I'll get the call is, hey, why do I have a whole field of weeds? Well, you do because the land needs to heal. You need to let that succession occur. My recommendation is to go out there and mow that down before all those weeds go to seed. And then by the second year, if you let that succession occur, you will have grasses and legumes coming up. By the third year, you will have the best pasture you've ever had. So I'm going to talk more about rest, but my point is to have diverse pastures made up of both annuals and perennials. You need to have forbs, you need to have grasses, and you need to have legumes. And you probably are going to have some browse even though you don't want it. Multiflora rose down here, the white flower is the bane of my existence. It's such a pain in the butt. It's quick growing. It literally takes mowing at least 6 times in one season to kill it. It's the only thing I've used chemicals on my property. I don't run organic, I run holistic. I run what's best for me, my pocketbook, my animals, and my pastures. So this plant I use Roundup on. I will go around once a year, spray it, just that plant itself with Roundup. It will kill it within a few weeks. It might take 2, and then that's it. It doesn't spread in the soil. It's not there for a long time. It's a great tool. So what I'm saying is I'm not excluding anything. I will pick everything if it fits into my system, okay? This is not dogmatic. This is nature. It craves and needs different things. Those are raspberries, and we have trees up here. You're gonna see browse. Typically, you're gonna get rid of browse, but browse can be really good food, especially for goats. But my cattle go nuts for leaves when they're growing, especially maple, because I have a feeling they're very sweet. We got grasses, legumes, forbs, and browse make a diverse pasture. This is just a graph showing you how those that slump. I want to show you exactly how that slump works. So you see the cool season grasses are going to go nuts early in the season, but then we have that big slump, too hot for cool season grasses to grow. That's where integrating a warm season annual can help you. But again, it's extremely difficult because you're going to have to plant that in fields. You're going to have to till. And honestly, with perennial pasture systems, we want to avoid tilling. There's no reason to do that. We know the seeds are there. We just need to make the area more conducive for that growth. It's theoretical. You're going to develop grazing eyes, grazer eyes now as we keep moving through this. And that's what it's going to give you an idea of what to do next. And I'm always here too. But that's the cool season versus warm season slump. And that's why we have to have a diverse mixture if possible. What happens if you, so here's what happens if you don't have annuals for your warm season slump. You'll end up feeding hay, or you're going to injure your pastures. I see so many grazers make this mistake. I have 20 cattle, boom, we hit a drought in June. My cool season grasses fail. I've got nothing. Nothing's growing. It's too hot. So what you do is you rotate and run your cattle over there, or your goats or whatever, over and over again, and they just decimate that land. It will not grow back for a year. What I recommend is you destock, get rid of animals, sell them. Secondly, you could buy hay in, but that's going to cost you a lot of money. So just keep in mind, when you see people buying hay in July, they have an overstocking problem. They need to get rid of some of the animals. And the reason is they have this problem because their cool season grasses have failed in the heat, basically. So how do we keep our pastures diverse, a mix of annual, perennial, and dense? And by the way, this picture would be the exact opposite of diverse, annual, perennial, and dense, right? You don't want to ever see soil. If you see soil, and I mean within reason, you got a problem, okay? The first thing you've got to do is keep it vegetative, which they always say. So again, we know we need this diversity. We know we have this mix. We know that we have to be dense. Here's how we do it. We keep plants vegetative. And most of you probably have an inkling about this. It makes sense. The most nutrition is in these plants when they're growing in their vegetative stage, before they're putting energy into making fruit or seed. That's when they're worth the most through an animal. So we want to feed the animals when they're at that stage. Now that's ideal, but it's not dogmatic. When we do your rotation plans next week and the next couple weeks that we started, you're going to realize that you probably can't cover all your ground quick enough to knock it back. So if I have 120, 130 acres and 100 cattle, I need to run over 120 acres in 15 days. Those are big paddocks, and I don't know that I can do it. So some of that pasture is going to get away from me. That's okay. You don't need to go out there and run diesel and run a tractor to get it back. It's okay to have a mix. That mix is also different ages. So we don't want a golf course, but we do want them vegetative. So this really comes into play with our length of rotation. I'll talk more about this. So the first rule of keeping them diverse and a mix and dense is keeping plants in a vegetative state as possible. And that requires you to graze them when they're vegetative, okay? And that also means you're not grazing them when they're too young. This is the growth stage of a plant. And so you can see pasture quality and pasture yield. And right there where those two meet is where you want it. It's early in that life cycle of that plant because the plant's going to peak at the top in phase 3. We're going to hit it somewhere in phase 2 where it's not too young, not too old, and super nutritious. And that's where our yield, because that plant is pretty big at that point, equals our quality. That's where we want to be. And that, again, is going to take your grazer's eye to understand that. But if I can put it in simple terms, in May, you need to have a 15-day rotation, 15 to 20. After May, for your second and third, you need 30 to 60 days of rest before rotation. Makes sense? And I'll show you guys some more of that. So if we turn animals out on May 1st, we're going to try to touch the whole farm by May 20th. Then we're going to start the rotation over, but we're going to slow it down. So instead of spending, 8 hours on that paddock, they may spend a full 24 hours and really eat it down, and that paddock's going to rest for 30 to 60 days. That's because we're hitting it on vegetative. Elizabeth, does that make sense? You're the only one that I can see, so I'm picking on you, sorry. But if something doesn't make sense, let me know, because there's a lot of concepts I'm talking about here. But they really are just about keeping our plants vegetative. These are terrible looking pastures. If you drive around this year, you will see this everywhere. Oops, hold on, let me just put my phone in. Because people are overgrazing, all the time, because they think grass is free and they think grass will grow back. No, it doesn't grow back. I'll tell you, there is no nutritional value those cows are getting right now. They're getting no nutrition, they're wasting energy, and they're hurting that grass. That grass will not come back well. And look at all the weeds they're leaving behind. Up here, we have wet soil that was pubbed, and that can be okay. I told you, nature creates a disturbance. But if you come back and hit this again when it's like in this condition, you're gonna set it back. The way we manage to be diverse, a mix of annual and perennials and dense, is by the intensity of our grazing, the duration of our grazing, and our recovery. It's actually pretty simple. So, oh, and by the way, all animals eat grass. It's a tonic, like these dogs. It's pretty neat. So the intensity of the grazing. So how much do we want to remove or destroy from our paddock when we let these animals out? Well, ideally we want full usage, but that may not be possible. But typically you want to start grazing when the grass is 9 to 15 inches high, depending on what it is. Legumes, birdfoot, clover are not going to get more than a couple inches high. That orchard grass is going to be 15 inches high come June. So, and you want to remove to about 4 to 7 inches. This is really, it's not set in stone. And what I have these things called pasture sticks, and I'll try to get you all one, or I'll tell you where to get them. It'll help you decide if you should graze or not. I call it a dummy stick. It's great. It's great for beginners, like graze, don't graze, but it's actually much more complex than that. This is what gets a lot of people. There's no such thing as wasted forage. If that animal eats it and poops it out, awesome. If it lays on it, awesome. If it digs a hole there, awesome. That food is worth just as much trampled as it is going through them. We're not going to make animals clean up pasture. That's a recipe for disaster. We're going to just make sure the animals are getting the nutrition they need and the pasture is getting the intensity of duration that we want. We don't want animals grazing down below that 4 to 7 inches. It injures the plant too much. I'm going to show you why in a few slides. So don't go below that. If you clip your pastures, don't clip below 9 inches. There's no reason to. And I'll show you why in a minute. You're going to injure the plant. To make our pastures a mix of annual perennials, to make it dense, we need to vary the intensity of grazing and make sure we don't take too much off. If you don't take enough off, it can be a little bit harmful, but it's far more harmful to take too much, okay? Overgrazing is really what we're trying to avoid here. The duration, this is how long we're generally in a paddock, okay? And look at this sheep. Again, there's no food here for that animal. If you look on the right, this is a really good looking grazed. Look at all this. They took their crowns off. They left so much. There's no dirt there. That looks great. As a general rule, okay? This is pretty strict actually. Animals really shouldn't spend more than 4 days ever on grass, unless you're a sacrifice paddock. Let me show you why. Wait, I'm gonna show you why before we go back to that. Here's some typical grasses in your pasture. If I take 50% of that grass, if it's 10 inches and I get it down to 5, the roots stop growing. They do not stop growing ever. That plant's gonna keep going. If I take 70%, if I have the 10 inches and I take 7 inches off it, 50% of the roots stop growing for 17 days. If you have a 30-day rotation, you just lost half of it. It's useless. If you use 90% of that plant, it will not grow for at least 17 days total, and probably longer than that. You really cannot regraze that. Look at the pictures here of the plants. Look at the roots. Cut every 2 weeks, cut to 2 inches every 2 weeks, and cut every 4 weeks. You can see that when you cut the top off a plant, when you bite the top of a plant, the roots give their life to make more plant. The plant literally absorbs the roots because it needs carbon and nitrogen to grow. The only way it can keep growing is it needs sunlight, it needs solar. So it has to have green out there. So that's why when you overgraze in May or June, those plants don't grow back because they don't have the roots to do it. On top of that, those roots now have gotten shorter to grow more plant. Now they can't get water because the roots are compromised. So it's a double whammy. This is how bad overgrazing is. This is exactly how it works. You take the top, you take the bottom, and you can't grow back. So that's the duration, typically not more than 4 days. The other thing, other than intensity duration, is recovery. We got to give them time to recover, and that depends on the season. Now, I told you in May, when the grass is exploding, when that green up is happening, 15 to 20-day intervals are pretty typical. And what we're trying to do is just set the grass back. We literally want to get out there, and like there will be times where I'll move those 100 cows 2 or 3 times a day because I just want them taking a bite off the top of the plant, and then I want to leave it going to regrow. What that does is it stimulates the plants. Plants evolved with cattle. When they get bitten, they know they were bitten. It excites them. They grow back, and they can tell the difference between a bite and a blade. I know it's weird, but they can, and we don't know why. So if we can get our animals in that spring green up really quickly, just take a bite out of everything, then we're going to stimulate them to grow more. And that next time we come through, they're going to be looking really good. If we go out there, we hit them hard. Let's just say we leave out them for 6 days. So the first 2 days, they go take a bite at every plant they love. It's candy. Oh my gosh, this is good. They're going to leave the less desirable stuff alone. They come back to that same spot of that paddock 2 days later, they bite again. The third bite they take is literally going to kill that plant. And that's when you look out in the pasture and you just see weeds because they've just taken bites over and over again of those plants. That's why the 4 days exist. Those animals, because that plant will really start growing from that energization 4 days later. So it takes a bite on the first day, that plant's gonna start growing again on the 4th day, and that's when the cattle's gonna go back to it, or whatever animal it is, because it can smell that regrowth and it wants it. That's what kills good pasture plants. That's why I get women calling me up saying, I planted this pasture last year, I spent $10,000 and nothing's growing back. Well, because you killed it, because you didn't give it enough recovery time. So in the summer, the recovery time is longer because we talked about this. The plants are more mature, the grasses are longer, and they're trying to make seed. When we get into our normal rotation, we're looking at a more 30, 40, even some people can run 90-day rotations to get back out there. Now, if you are going to have that long a recovery time, you can increase the density or the intensity of your grazing. So like the buffalo on the Great Plains, if you're not coming back for 60 days and it's June, you can be a little more intense. But remember, if it gets too low, if you go below that 4 inches, your animals are gonna suffer. And I'm gonna talk more about that later too, because you gotta decide, even though you're a grass farmer, you're doing this to make meat. So you have to make sure those animals are gaining. If you injure the pasture, the animals won't gain. So to make diverse pastures that are both annual and perennial, that are dense, we need to vary the intensity, the duration, and the recovery period of our grazing, okay? It sounds simple, but when you start thinking of it this way, it gets a little bit easier. So I alluded to this a minute ago, how animal impact can transform your pastures. You can pretty much get by with just animal impact to improve pastures. I don't own a tractor. I don't own a truck. I don't own any of that stuff. I farm a lot of that out to other people when I do need it. And that's, we'll talk about marketing, we'll talk more about that, but I use animals to transform my soil. If I have a weedy area, I will sometimes set up a lane and I will run the animals through that lane over and over again to trample it. And what that does is it breaks up that weed cycle. I'm gonna trample the weeds down. They're not gonna produce seeds that year. I'm gonna disturb the soil a little bit. I'm gonna add a bunch of manure and urine to it probably. I'm gonna excite the soil. And then we know that area is gonna grow. Now it has what it needs to grow grass, right? What we've done with the animals is made that area more conducive to the plants that we want. Where weeds were thriving before, we have now added disturbance with manure, and we're gonna also sprinkle in a little bit of recovery, and that's what makes grass for us, okay? That's a way that I kill weeds, that I transform weeds into grass. I use animals to do it by making lanes and making them trample it. It improves the soil immensely. You can't even imagine. I do not make hay anymore on my property. It is a waste for me. I bring hay in. Each bale of hay is worth $50 in fertilizer alone. Plus, we don't even really sure. I would say that a typical 1,000-pound bale is probably easily worth in nutrition for an animal and nutrients $75. I also would tell you that hay is highly undervalued. $50 is extremely cheap. So it's already worth 75 bucks. So on top of that, if you bring in hay, whether it's winter or summer, and one of the really good ways to rehab really crappy pasture is to buy hay bales and unroll them and let animals eat them, because what you're really missing is a lot of organic matter. But in that bale is millions of free seeds that you probably want. And if your land is conducive and well for grass, they'll grow there. You're going to get a ton of organic matter, or a half a ton, 1,000 pounds. The cattle will eat some of it. They're going to get all that minerals and nutrients. So I would highly recommend that you buy hay in. Last year, I bought bales for $15 each delivered, round bales, which is crazy because people are making so much hay. This year was a really bad hay year, but on a normal explosive year, people will have a lot of hay left over. They'll be looking to get rid of it. That's money in the bank. You buy that, you roll that onto the pasture, that's coming right back to you. If you make your hay and send it off, you're sending that nutrition off your farm. You're sending that minerals off your farm that you put in. It's leaving. Bring stuff into your system. Don't take it out, okay? So yeah, I don't know if I talk about, okay. And cows do eat weeds. This cow here on the left is eating like Canada thistle. Their mouths are crazy hard. This one's obviously eating hemp, and this other one is eating goldenrod. You can train cattle to eat weeds. This woman, Kathy Voigt, has a behavioral training system to teach cattle to eat weeds. Now, they won't always eat them because a plant tastes different no matter what time of year it is. As you're out there every day, as you're with your animals, you're going to see their preferences, and they change very quickly. It's amazing what they like. Typically, any weed that gets above a few inches or 8 inches is not going to be palatable, but there are ways to get them to eat them. The number one way to not get them to eat weeds is to try to force them. You can't force them. If you're forcing your animals to clean stuff up, they're losing weight. It's totally counterproductive. Don't fight nature, work with it, okay? And always think about if I can get an animal to do this better. It's like spreading manure. So a lot of folks, dairies have to do this, but they'll bring their cattle in for the winter. They'll feed them under a barn, and they'll spread that manure. I'm not doing that. How much diesel is that going to spend for me on a beef farm? My cattle are going to be out in the field for the winter in a sacrifice paddock. They're going to poop right there. I'm not moving it. I'm not spending diesel to do it. It's going to improve the pasture if I allow it. Rest and recovery. Okay, simple as that. So could I get an animal to do this work for me? Okay, so that's kind of the philosophy of grazing. We want to make good animals. We need good grass. We are grass farmers. I should make a grass farmer hat for all of you. Maybe I will, because I have one. To make our pastures a mixture of annual and perennials, to make them dense, and I'm missing one, and nutritive, we have to vary the intensity, the duration, and the recovery period of those grasses. So that's what we're going to do. Now, next week, I'm going to send you guys with homework, and part of that's going to be mapping your place. And if you don't have one, I'll give one to you. We all have to start with what we've got. We've all got different resources. We've all got different soil types. We've all got different amounts of time. So it all starts with what you got. So we're going to draw this map out together and take a look at what we got. Do you already have some fencing? Do you have a stream? Do you have ponds? You need to test your soil so we know how we can make some improvements. You know, there are some real quick fixes for soil. If you're adding lime to adjust the pH, if it's abused. Typically what I see abused pastures are pastures that have been hayed for 40 years and nothing's ever really been put back on them. That's a recipe for just weedy hay and really poor pasture. The way to get that to come back is to make the animals work for you. But we won't know what it looks like until we get those soil tests back. I can help you do that, or you can figure it out. It's really easy to do a soil test, but you have to do them. And then this equipment thing is here because I talked to a lot of old school farmers who are really reluctant to stop making hay. And I have a whole presentation trying to convince people to stop making hay typically. And selling their hay equipment often can be very profitable for them. You can sell that equipment, put $20,000 in your pocket, and then maybe build a better system for your rotation, which is going to obviously make you more money than growing hay typically and selling it off the farm. Now, I'm not saying that anybody making hay is a rube. There's a time and a place you're making hay, and I love my haymakers. There are some retirees, some old timers, a couple of women actually who refuse to wear shade or hats in the summer, which drives me nuts. I don't know, they love the sun. They love to make hay. It's their passion, and I'll pay them a fair wage in cash to do what they love, and they provide me a service with something I need by bringing and making me hay. So the point of the slide, though, is starting with what you got. So next week, I'm going to want to know what you got, and we're going to start playing with it. Once we know what we got, we can define our goals. Look how bad this pasture is. This probably hits every single thing that you don't want to see. This was probably at one point a pond, and this is why you never allow animals access to water in a pond, because they will ruin it. They will not only poop in it and pee in it and make it non-potable, they will denude the sides by walking in it, and it will flatten out the area until the pond disappears just like this. Look at these pathways through the soil. You never want to see bare soil like that. That's a conduit to water. It's literally like a PVC pipe that's going to draw all that mud, rip all the soil out of your pastures, and where's it going to put it? In your pond and fill it in. Animals should never have direct access to water within a little bit of reason. I have 2 emergency ponds on my farm that I can open up if I ever need to, like if my water system breaks, but typically they don't have access to that. We're going to go over your resources next week. You're going to tell me what you got. You're going to show me a map. And then we're going to talk about what your goals are. Incompatible goals. Here's 2 things. The 2 biggest predictors of success in grazing that I see so many beginning farmers is 1, having a written business plan that you can change. You can dream. It's fun to dream. I love to dream too, but a dream is not a business plan. I want to see numbers. I want to see exactitudes, within reason. And that's part of improving your goals. The second thing is having incompatible goals sync grazers. I run stocker. Let's just say I'm finishing cattle. Okay, ready? You cannot finish cattle appropriately and greatly improve pastures at the same time. They are incompatible goals. You can do one thing really well, which is put weight on cattle, or really improve pastures, or you can do 2 things kind of well. Now, that doesn't mean you can't do both at the same time. But as we go through these goals, I want to start thinking about that. Because is your goal to improve the pastures? Then you should probably be running a different class of animal at a different rate. Or is your goal running race cars? I call stockers and finishers race cars because they need the best feed and they need to be pampered to get fat and put on marbling. They are not going to be improving pasture because you're going to be having them have very short durations, eating the cream, the best stuff, and then getting out of there. That's not really good pasture management. So I hope that makes sense to you. Having a good business plan and having your goals set is part of your business plan. When you make a decision, you can go back and say, well, does that go with my goal or does it not? And that can be a really, really great instrument to help you make decisions about your farm. So next week, we'll start defining goals. I'm also going to send you guys these NRCS pasture condition score sheet. These are awesome. The NRCS is a Natural Resource Conservation Society system. I don't know. They are the federal farm folks. They're also the ones that are involved with giving you loans from the FSA, which is great, or grants. If you want any grants, you have to be in with these guys. If you do have a farm, you should be in contact with them. Get on their list so they can see. I see someone chatting. Oh, I lost it. Can you just unmute yourself who's ever chatting and tell me? Is it possible? Somebody have a question?
Hey, it's Andrea. Sorry, I did have a question. I was just curious, maybe the answer is no, but is there a big difference between kind of pastures that you want for horses versus pastures for cows?
Yes, there are some differences because horses are hindgut fermenters. They're not ruminants per se. And some pastures can definitely injure horses, obviously. Are you running all horses at your place?
Yeah, I have horses and I have some goats.
Okay.
And we just cleared a bunch of fields. So I'm trying to, mostly it's the horses, but I have goats as well.
Horses are way tougher on grass than cattle because they have teeth. Cattle really don't have teeth. Horses and sheep and goats can get way to the bottom of a piece of grass and really hurt it bad. Rotating horses is much more difficult. But there are methods and parts of it that will definitely help you improve your pasture. That's a great question. There are some differences. And as we go along, if you want me to elaborate on some stuff, feel free to get at me because I can throw some more stuff in about that. Because remind me, because I might forget. This sheet is going to allow you to score your pastures. It will literally allow you to walk around and say which are your best pastures by this score sheet. It's going to look at how much grass is on the ground, the variability, it's literally what we're talking about. It's the diversity, the variability, and the density. It's going to score it on that. This is also how you get grants. So full disclosure, I received a $77,000 grant from the NRCS maybe 5 years ago to build fencing on my pasture. They came out, we did these sheets, the pasture sucked, but more importantly, the animals had all kinds of ways to dirt around my land. So this fencing was provided to me by the federal government, which I'm very happy for, to keep our water clean. And it's done a great job of doing that because my animals can no longer get in there. My point is, if you want to get these grants, they're out there. They are. You are going to have to do these sheets and contact them. Get them involved. Have them come out to your farm and take a walk with you. And quite honestly, if they come, I might be coming with them anyway. So I'll send you guys these and you can go over them. What I will say, besides the business plan, besides the incompatible goals, another thing that's super important is obviously doing this because anyway, I forgot where I was going with that. Let's move on. Sorry. There's so much stuff to think about in this presentation. Okay, we know how we get healthy pastures now, generally, but I want to look at some signs that the pastures are actually healthy, because things can look really good and they may not be. The way to do that is because you're out there every day with your animals, is to look at their health. So let's spend some time talking about what healthy animals look like. So ruminants and horses, high gut fermenters, evolved with grass. Literally, these things grew together to be eaten and to eat. It's amazing. It's incredible to me. They're symbiotic. The gut flora in these animals is what really feeds them, just like beavers, just like elephants, just like cattle, horses, all these animals that break down grasses and legumes. It's not really them that's breaking them down, and the same with us. It's the biota in their intestines that are doing it. So we're trying to keep them healthy. That's really our point with this. Below pH of 6.2, that gut flora is deactivated. That's what is called acidosis. That's when you feed animals too much grain. It lowers their the acidity in their rumen, and it kills that bacteria. Then the bacteria cannot process plants anymore. That's why heavy doses of grain are so tough on animals, because it kills the gut flora that are there. So yeah, that's how we want to keep our animals safe. There's something else I'm going to say there. So we're just feeding the flora inside there. So if you're seeing your animals every day, you're going to know what healthy animals look like. These are all really poor looking animals, by the way. They have a nice coat. They are alert. They are playing. They are mating. They have generally low parasite counts. They have really good looking manure, which I'm going to show you some pictures of. And they have a full rumen. This cow down here, this calf, is a much older calf than it looks like, I can tell, and it's got really bad scours, and it's got some pressure wounds on its back, and I can actually see the diarrhea coming out of its back end. This sheep is probably, I guarantee the sheep are full of barber pole worms. If you have goats or sheep, I highly recommend you take our parasite control course for small ruminants coming up in May, because you'll get access to our fecal lab in Ulster, wherever you are, where you can come in and do your own fecal samples and see if you treat these animals. So that's not our thing, or that's not for this class, but super important. So this is what healthy animals look like. And that's how we know our pastures are really meeting our goals, right? How to know if your cattle are full. It's tougher with goats and sheep. The rumen is on the left side of the body. So if we look at this goat from the top, we see that left side is obviously, it's more round and bigger because that's where the rumen is. The sheep is the same way. The cow, though, has a really neat little indicator on it. That triangle right there where the circle is where the rumen is on a cow. That cow is empty right now. When that animal is full, there will be no triangle there. So that's a good way to know your animals have eaten for the day. Why is that important? Well, if I'm rotating and I left them out in the paddock for the day and I come back at the end of the day and it seems like there's a lot of grass there, and I look and I know they haven't been feeding, I know something's wrong. So maybe their water's messed up. I can't tell you how many times a dead animal has fallen in my water and they won't drink, obviously. Another reason to be out there every day, whether it be a lot of mice, squirrels, chipmunks, stuff like that, and birds. That's why they don't have water, they're not going to eat. So if you see this mark on your animals, if they're not full, if they're not healthy, if they're not eating, you got a problem. You got to figure out what it is. If they're crying, so a lot of folks won't rotate until their animals are bawling. That's a terrible idea. If those animals are crying because they don't have enough food, they're losing weight, and that's not going to help. I will say this. I was a behaviorist for the Air Force for 10 years before I was a farmer. So animal behavior and human behavior is really important to me. And a lot of farmers get into some really bad behavioral systems by kind of making their animals bawl and cry. If you only move them when they cry, they're going to start crying all the time as soon as they're not done with that. And then you're going to have to ignore that bawling, and your neighbor's going to get pissed and blah, blah, blah. My point is, if you're consistent with the animals and if you're fair with them, if you're not trying to make them clean stuff up, they're going to be fine, okay? But if you start only moving them when they cry or when they act up, you're going to create a problem right there. That's a whole class in itself. But keep that in mind. If you see something like that, if you see weird crying, if you see weird behavior, we get this a lot with pigs where there'll be a feed bucket, and one day Janie walks out their bucket, the pig knocks her over, and he gets the feed. Well, the next day he does the same thing, and now you've trained that animal to knock you over for feed. The appropriate measure would be, and anytime any animal is acting inappropriate with you, gives you a bad feeling, trust your gut, or you don't like what they're doing, get away, walk away, ignore it, okay? Don't yell and scream, just leave. That's how you stop an animal from doing something that you don't like. Never yell at animals, never bang on stuff, never scream. It doesn't do anything but scare them, and you don't want to be around scared animals. In August, and I'm going to talk about this next week when we get into the actual systems of rotational grazing. Again, today is theoretical. Next week's going to be more nuts and bolts. We're going to talk about a bud box. That's the way I load cattle now. It's awesome. And it just requires very quiet movement, taking advantage of the animal's natural tendencies, no yelling, no screaming. I can load 70 cattle in about 2 hours with not one yell, 3 people, and nothing screaming. It's great. So are you causing bad behavior from your animals? Because a lot of people often do. Let me do a time check here. Okay, we're in good shape. Also, I can tell because my throat starts giving out. Okay, more theoretical stuff, folks. We know our animal's healthy, we know it's full. I just want to talk about the actual grasses for a second. This doesn't really apply to forbs and legumes, but on the grass, the top part's energy, the middle part is fiber, and the bottom is protein. Different classes of animals need different levels of that. So when we run, let's say it's May, we're doing our 20-day rotation over 120 acres. So we're moving really fast to just eat the tips off of all those grasses. That's what we want. We want to feed those animals energy. Don't get caught in this protein is everything trap. It's not true. I get a lot of people too in the winter that are like giving high protein feeds to their cattle because they're cold. That's not what to do. That's the opposite. Protein takes more energy to break down than carbohydrates. What you want to do in the winter when it's really cold is give them first cutting crabby hay because it allows that rumen inside them. And horses are a little different in this. Horses actually do need high protein, but the cattle and your other ruminants, your true ruminants, will eat that fiber. It will be in them, and that's like an oven inside them. If you fill them full of protein, it's going to take more energy to process that protein, and they're going to get colder in the long run. And here's why. Here's another reason we don't want our animals overgrazing and eat to the bottom of those plants, because they're going to kill them, and they're going to be overdosing on the protein. So let's say the animals have been in there for 12 days. The first bite, they got the energy. Cool, they're feeling good. The second bite, they got a little bit of energy and fiber. Okay, by the end of that, they're just getting protein. There's no energy, and they're using all their energy to process that protein. You need to have a mix of these things. That's another reason why it's so important to use the intensity, the duration, and the recovering of your grazing to produce a mixture of annual and perennials that are dense, and I'm missing something. But that's the point of all that. Does somebody have a question? Okay, so keep that in mind when you're out there. Take a bite, eat more dirt, try these things, eat a piece of grass, see if it tastes sweet to you. It's kind of neat. You can tell different kinds of grasses taste different throughout the year. So right now, remember, we're talking about how to tell that our pastures are giving our animals what they need. And the way to do that really is their condition, their coat, if they look at, and then their manure is a great indicator. This one goat with his tail up looks great. This other goat on the other side obviously has scours and is very dirty. That's an accident waiting to happen right there because flies are going to land on there and they're going to get fly strike and it's going to hurt that animal bad. If you have animals with the back end that looks like that, you got a problem. Unless it's like very early May. And I'll talk about that in 1 second. Or you change minerals. One time, I know Carrie on here because she used to come to visit me and when I have some friends in Boston, and it might have been the year she was there. I changed minerals one year. I've never seen this. The salt was the higher concentration. I literally had fountains of manure coming out of my animals. It was incredible. And I realized it was from the extra salt. So if you're changing minerals, that's one thing, but generally poop should never be that loose. They want to look like this, the perfect pumpkin pie. Now, this is a cow. It's not a sheep or a goat. They're tougher to deal with. And horses are a little bit too. This has the perfect amount of energy and protein ratio and fiber ratio. A perfect pumpkin pie. This is what you generally want to see most of the year. This is our winter poop, and you guys all know what this looks like. This is too much cellulose. This is too much fiber and not enough protein and energy, but that's okay. It's wintertime. We can't feed our animals the best stuff year round. It's not natural for them either. You know, another mistake that even really experienced growers do, if you're not running the race cars, if you're not growing animals that are finishing, you don't need to be feeding them and getting them super fat all winter. There's a natural cycle. The light slows, the light goes away, and it changes their metabolism and they change their body. They put more fat on, they grow more hair, and they use their nutrients different. If you continue to feed them and they get fat, they're not gonna have a good spring. They're gonna be too hot. They're not gonna breed back well. The obesity in these animals is tough on them. So these types of poops are okay. You don't have to go out and buy $100 protein tub made with gosh knows what from God knows where. You can get by with this as long as your animals are looking good, right? They have good condition, their coats look good, they're playing, they're healthy, okay? So that's our winter poop. We know what our perfect pumpkin pie was. That's great. Animals are doing great. This is okay in winter. We never want to see this in summer. We got an issue. And then the runny pile. So we see these in two situations. One, I said when I change minerals, that's pretty rare. Most often you're going to see it in the spring. What they call that is washy grass. So in April, if the cattle have access to those growing stems, which you don't really want them to, okay? You don't want them out there biting those. You want to kind of keep them penned up for now until the growing season really starts, till we have that 10 inches of grass. You don't want them out there, okay? But if they are out there and they have access to that high proteinaceous, high water containing grass, they're going to have poop like this, and that's okay in the early spring. If you see this in the summer, you need to firm it up. You have too much protein in your pasture, or however you're feeding them, and it going through them, you're wasting protein going through them. So if you see this kind of poop in the summer, a great way to clean it up is to feed some hay. And I'm talking like a mouthful. I will feed 1 square bale of hay for every 50 cattle I have if I start seeing this kind of poop. There is one other exception to this rule, and this is race cars. And I bring this up because race cars needs high protein, and we want their poop to look like this, which looks like dairy poop. If I'm running stockers and I'm trying to put 3 pounds a day on, or if I'm finishing animals, I kind of want this kind of poop because it tells me they have enough protein in their diet that they can't use it all. So, but for our intents and purposes, okay, this is what we want to see year round. We want all summer, spring and fall, this is what we want. Winter, we're gonna see this, and that's okay, but we never want to see this in summer. In the very early spring, we will see this. If we see it at other times of the year, we need to give them more fiber because they're passing protein through their body. Race cars can have this poop. Dairy cattle can have this poop because they're high producing, but other animals should not. You have an issue if you're seeing this. We talked about keeping plants vegetative. And I also just want to talk about ways to injure your pasture. Look at this picture, it's so cool. Wouldn't we all be so blessed to have a farm that was like a giant ladder like that? There are no straight lines in nature, folks, so don't feel bad if yours doesn't look like that. Mine sure as heck doesn't. Oh, by the way, in August, we're having a thing at my farm. So if you guys want to come out and see what I do on my place, come on out for August for the bud box training. But if you keep involved in my emails, I'll remind you of that. Here's how you injure pastures. We talked about this. Overgrazing 2 animals for too long makes the forage short. Really, ideally more than 4 days. If you can't do that, it's okay, I understand. We are making a holistic system here. This system works for you, it works for your animals, and it works for your grass. There are no set rules here. If you have to do a 6-day rotation, that is okay. We can make it work because it works best for you. It's holistical. It's everything at once. I'm here to help you find that balance and figure it out, okay? Undergrazing. We haven't talked about that yet. We touched on a little bit. As plants grow and produce seeds, we know they become less nutritive because they put all that into the seeds or the fruits. If we undergraze by not hitting all those pastures, then we're also opening the door to a little more, we need more disturbance there. So those plants are going to get big if they're forbs. Usually the plants that grow the tallest and put the more seeds out are the least desirable. You're going to have an issue. So undergrazing can injure your pasture, but it's not as close to level as overgrazing. Pugging is a big one this time of year. Pugging, if you don't know that word, loaf is a real world too. Loaf is cattle loaf. That's when they lay on the ground and sit around. And they pug. Pug is when they stand in mud. You have 1,200-pound animals standing on 2 legs. You have 600 pounds on each of those hooves shooting down into the ground. That is a massive amount of weight in compaction. Pugging and mud will really, really disturb your pastures. I'm not going to say it's going to ruin it because with enough recovery, those pastures will come back even better, but it's definitely going to set them back. So what should you do when it's really wet like it is now? You need to keep them isolated, and you're still in the sacrifice paddock. Many people bring their animals out far too early in the season. I already told y'all, 10 inches, wait till it's 9 or 10 inches high before you start grazing in the spring, okay? And you'd be surprised, you go out there and measure a piece of grass, it's a lot longer than you think. You look at the naked eye. When I give you your grazing sticks, it'll help with this a lot. Or if I tell you how to get them, I can't ship them to everybody, but you'll be able to see, you'll put that on the ground. You'll see 9 inches is sooner than you think, typically in very early May. But don't let them out of that sacrifice area until the bugging's over. And that could be longer than you think. You may be feeding hay for their longer. It's okay, because that piece of ground is going to be incredible in 2 years, because you're not going to go back to that piece of ground next year. You need to let it rest a full year because you hurt it so bad. It's got to recover. Like I told you before, we really disturb it. We really knock it down the first year, and it's going to come back as all weeds. We're going to mow those weeds and then let it come back as grass. The next year, by year 3, you're going to be golden. So That's another way to damage your pasture. Drought. This year will not be a drought. Last year was for most of us. The dairy folks are telling me we were going to have a very wet summer and a very productive summer. They were right about winter. They said it'd be a lot of snow when there was. So I'm sticking with them. You can plan for drought and absolutely should. It's a great way to injure your pastures. I told you the typical scenario. We run the pastures until June. We get a drought. It's too hot for our cool season grasses to grow. Literally nothing grows. We keep rotating. We keep taking bites. We injure those plants in the drought and they don't grow back. You've exasperated. You've literally multiplied it worse by overgrazing it. So when we do hit that drought, I already told you the off animals. The second best thing you can do is buy hay, and the worst thing you can do is keep rotating. The other big one that injures pastures is compaction. People don't give this enough respect, in my opinion. Carrie had mentioned earlier the word silvopasture. Yeah, it's great. You leave cattle too long in the forest and they're around those roots, they're going to compact the roots and kill them, and they will literally kill the trees by spending too much time under them. Animals are heavy, and when they're concentrated, they put a lot of weight on the ground. But the ground can recover very well if it's given enough time. So where you typically see compaction is fields where tractors run a lot, or hay fields where they've been going the same way. There's not a lot of ways to cure compaction. And we'll talk about remediation of pastures in the presentation, but if we do find a lot of compaction, we got to make some decisions about maybe we can grow some forage radishes out there. Maybe we can do some tillage to break it up, or maybe we can find an animal like a pig to help us, but pigs really aren't that great at alleviating compaction. So we have our injured pastures on our farm. How do we make them better? Well, I already mentioned first and foremost that management is the first way. Can an animal do this? Can I get this animal to do so than a tractor? Animals excite the biota. Animals bring manure. They bring other life with them. So the best way to cure injured pastures is by running animals over them. I mentioned that with Alan Savory. They thought the elephants were overeating. No, the desertification is being won now. They're stopping it by bringing the animals back, by selectively grazing these elephants in these areas. They're literally rotating them, and it's bringing the grasses back because it excites the energy. It provides resources for the other animals to eat, and it's a natural part of the system. The second thing I touched on too already was pH amendment. That's where your soil tests come in. Sometimes your pH is off because someone removed all the nutrients from that pasture for 40 years of haying. So we may need to add some lime to it. Lime takes a good year to work in. It's literally a rock. So the sooner you get that soil test done, the sooner we get the amendments down, the better. There's also fertilizer too. Now, if I had a bare grass, let's say I have an acre of dirt, what I would do is I wouldn't till it and seed it. I would feed those, I would unroll hay bales and feed hay out there for as long as I could get by doing it. Let the animals drop all that manure, all that urine, all that energy, all that biotic excitement, and work that organic matter into the ground with their hooves, and then leave it alone for a year. That will bring back grass. And that's going to save a lot of resources. Remember, we're talking holistic. What works for you is not spending a lot of money. The way to make money in farming is not spending it in the first place. You got a pasture out there, nothing's growing in it because you overgrazed it for 5 years. Well, going out there and then putting $5,000 worth of seed is not going to fix it because it's not ready for it. Okay. So seeding can work. I seed. I told you I frost seed every year. I actually just renovated 40 acres of my place. I learned a ton about renovation. It's outside the scope of this course, but if you'd like to talk about renovating pastures, we can talk about it if we have time at some point too in this, but I'm happy to talk about it at any time. But there are very easy ways to remedy pastures, and most of them involve management, period. Some people don't want to do that. You know, I ain't doing that. Okay, fine. Then spend the money over and over again every year buying seed, buying amendments, buying ammonium nitrate to get the grass to grow, but it's not going to grow because the management isn't there. Okay, simple as that. So weeds, yes, everybody wants to talk about it. And weeds are a huge part of everyone's pasture, but I actually have gotten to the point where I don't really see weeds anymore. So I just see them all as part of succession and as part of what they're doing. But let's take a little break here. I'm going to show a video real quick, just because I need a break from talking. We've said a lot. Does anybody have any questions or comments right off the bat here? Please feel free. Okay. I've said a lot, so I'd like to take a little tiny break when we do this, just to kind of let everybody just kind of reset for a second. So I'm going to show you this little part second, which is a soil carbon. Oh wait, you know what? I forgot. I didn't set my my Zoom up to show video, so it's not gonna work. Anyway, we'll just keep going through. Sorry for the confusion, everybody.
I have a question to
No
break.
one has anything to say.
Can you hear me?
Okay. Okay. Oh, Andrea, you were late. Oh, you just said hello. Hey, Andrea, did you introduce yourself to us?
I did not. I'm sorry I was late.
Yeah.
Yeah. Hi. My name is Andrea Grego. I have
Andrea? I don't
I
hear.
have
it.
a
Maybe she's busy.
small.
Okay, no big deal.
Jason, we're having
Okay.
that problem again.
Strategies to control weeds in pastures. So again, like I said, I don't really see weeds anymore. I see forbs and I see plants, working through the succession to become better pastures. Here's how we can work on renovating our grass to be good for animals. Number one is our grazing management. That's how the number one way to improve our pastures. Number two would be mechanical control. What that means is we're going to clip it. And that can be, I can see, Carrie, I can see you have a question. I can't hear you for some reason. I'm having problems with my Zoom for some reason. But Carrie, go ahead, type your question in and we can get to it if you can. And Andrea, I can't hear you either. And I'm sorry, this happened last time. So
Can you hear me, Jason?
just type them in, guys. But go for it and I can get to them. Grazing management, mechanical control, and chemical control, which I generally don't recommend. So let's look at each of those things for renovating pastures here. Grazing management is pretty simple. We've been talking about today, right? But the first step of our grazing management plan is going to be do our soil tests and do our NRCS grading sheets. Acidic soils favor weeds and they favor disturbance. So adding lime and getting that stuff in there will go a long way to helping you grow some grass. Sorry, Courtney was texting me. Now I can't hear anybody, but this has been an ongoing problem for my Zoom. If you got any questions, go ahead and type it in and I'll get to it, folks. No big deal. Sorry about that. And I'll see if I can log back in at the end of the presentation so we can actually speak together. So yeah, liming is a really great way, but remember, it takes a long time when we're getting these pastures back up. So it's not going to be something that's instantaneous. Rotational grazing will allow the plants that you want to grow, you're making conducive environment for them. It'll make them grow and the weeds not grow because you're going to let those grasses start outperforming those weeds. Now, remember, the weeds aren't always going to outperform the other plants typically because they're successional. They're going to come and they'll go. Really what will happen in the Northeast, like I was saying, is we're going to get a forest grow back because pastures are unnatural. But rotational grazing really is the number one way to renovate your pastures, period. Okay. I've told you before, animals can be trained to eat weeds. There's a whole movie you can watch. If you don't already subscribe, here's something to write down. If you don't subscribe to On Pasture Magazine, it is the premier grazing thing. They have extremely handsome authors that write for them. And they're actually seriously incredible. Kathy Voigt is the editor of that. And she's the one who made this book and movie called Cows Eat Weeds. You don't have to go that route right off the bat because you're going to use grazing management to transform your fields to start off with. High stocking density. I haven't talked about this yet. We have talked about intensity, duration, recovery, but how many animals per acre? There's a simple way. The only way I can tell you basically is when 70% of that pasture has been used, and that can be eaten, that can be pooped on, because remember, there's a zone of repugnance around manure. An animal won't eat around that. It's actually a really great reservoir because the seeds can stay there and plants will go right out of that manure patch and the animals won't eat it. It's cool. And those seeds will actually disseminate across the pasture. But the highest stocking density you can get is the better. From a holistic standpoint, from a time standpoint, having one herd is far better than having multiple herds. That can be difficult and you'll have to juggle from a management standpoint if you're breeding. But I'm telling you right now, you have much higher impact, you have less work to do, and you have better grazing when you have higher density. I want to see, so I'm going to talk about this for a second right now, I guess. Why do we have such high intensity? Or why does that graze? Okay, I got a question from Carrie. If you're getting to this, sacrifice paddock for winter. Okay, great. Let's talk about winter strategy. I'm going to get to it, Carrie. So we'll talk. She wants to know more about winter strategies. I'm going to talk to her about that. I forgot we have a slide. Here's what happens when you have 100 animals on 1 acre for 8 hours. They're used to the routine. They come into the paddock and they have their heads down. They do not look up and they're eating. Why? Because they are competing for good food. When there's that many animals, that there's not going to be leftover residue for them to come around and snack on, they know that, and they will compete to eat. It's awesome. So what you have is everything working in unison. You have 100 animals on that acre. They're all eating. They're eating everything. They're not looking up. They're just taking bites and moving on. And that's how you get really good pasture usage out there. So the higher density you can have, the better. And also, sorry, the trampling too. I keep telling you that trampled forage is not wasted forage. You're gonna knock it down, and that's gonna reintegrate back into the soil. That organic matter is still there, the nutrients are still there, and the biota is still there. Okay, so that's why you want high stock density. We'll get more about that next week when we get the nuts and bolts. So you probably are going to have to use, if you have multiflora rows, and I already talked about my chemical use, if you have a lot of goldenrod, which is rhizomal, it doesn't grow, and seed borne, so it literally grows from rhizomes under the ground. Some of these can be very pernicious and can take over your pastures. So you may not be able to deal with them just with grazing pressure. There are some plants like goldenrod that after, the middle of May, the cattle won't touch. I think it's too bitter. So you're going to have to do something about that. And that's when we start getting into a little more typical farming stuff, mechanical control. So what happens when we clip the top of the plant? The roots die and they regrow as part of the plant. We can use that to hurt weeds, okay? So we cannot, if you get out there, this is why we don't want to mow below that 9 inches, because we don't want to hurt the grass too much too, but the weeds hurt more if we take more off the top. So that 9-inch mark is right where it's good to leave the grasses growing, and it hurts the annual weeds because they typically have seed pods above that line and they're higher and they're successional. So they grow above the grass quicker. So if you want to get rid of those type of weeds, you need to mow, and you need to mow ideally before they set seed to set them back. Okay. And that's when repeated mowing comes in. But we got to think holistically about it. Is it worth it to mow your whole field, use the diesel, rent the tractor, put the time on the tractor, and compact that ground to get rid of those weeds? Or is there a better way to do it? There may not be, but maybe instead of going, let's look at your week. Let's say we have a bunch of goldenrod and we need to get rid of it. So we're going to run animals through it, but we're going to clip it, in May, and then we're going to try to come back in August and clip it, but we're not going to do more clippings because of compaction. Multiflora rows is going to take 6 mowings in one season to kill it. I used chemicals. I don't want to compact my ground by riding my tractor 6 times a season over my pasture. That's crazy to me. What's easier for me to just walk around a little bit of chemicals and dab it on. I'm not trying to justify it. I'm just saying this is my holistic control method, and that's why I don't have a dogma about any of this stuff, okay? Repeated clippings, just like repeated cattle eating grass, is the best way to kill those weeds. Hit them hard and hit them over and over again and keep clipping them, okay? Some plants, many weeds will just grow lower to the ground if you don't hit them hard enough. So let's say you have that Canada thistle and you run the tractor over it in May, and then it just grows back and only grows 6 inches. If you don't mow again to get rid of it at a lower point, you're gonna have a problem there. But I'm getting a little advanced. When we go over what you have for weeds, I'm here for you guys. This isn't only a class. I'm a resource now. I am here for the summer. You have my cell phone. If you have questions, we can sit down over Zoom and we can talk about what your weed pressures are. We can brainstorm what would be a really good way to deal with it. But because there is no one way, and if we all talk about it from a management perspective, we usually find a way that works for everybody. Okay. I said before that this takes commitment and diligence to do mechanical control. There have been years where I have literally taken a weed whacker. I run over 300 acres and I will just walk out there for an hour a day and just weed whack things, specifically multiflora rows that I don't want. That's commitment. You're gonna have to probably mow under your, you're gonna definitely have to mow under your fences anyway. We'll talk about that next week. So you're gonna need a weed whacker, and because the weeds really like to grow underneath your fences and short them out. We know we have, for the control of weeds, we know we have grazing management, which is our best. We know we have mechanical, and the last one I'm going to talk about is chemical control, which I don't recommend typically. Blanket chemical control does not hit any of our goals. It's going to kill the soil biota. It's going to kill all the plants out there, most of them. Most of the ones that kill forbs are also going to kill legumes or grasses. How does that serve us? If we think that we're going to make a better pasture by making it sterile and then replanting it, that is never going to work. We don't understand that the pasture is a mix of aggregates, of water, of organic dead things, of living organic things, of arthropods, insects, fungi, vegetation, manure, everything you think of. So you need to have all those components to be healthy. Sterile soil, as everyone knows, is not healthy soil. So when you do see a lot of weeds, these cattle are eating thistle, if you look, you got to ask yourself, why is it full of weeds? I need to amend this soil, not obliterate it. So keep that in mind. When we have a weed pressure problem, which we all have, because we all can work to better improve our pastures, why am I having those there? Did I really disturb that soil last year and come back too quick? Did I pug it? I mean, a lot of it has to do with disturbance, keep that in mind. When you have a well-established seed weed bed, that's going to take some time. And those tend to be the rhizomal ones, the mugworts and the goldenrods are terrible. And those are going to pretty much require either chemical or mechanical remediation. So if you have those kind of problems, let's talk. And a lot of us do, because that land was hayed for 30 years straight. Oh, that's the end of that presentation right there. But we're going to talk some more. I'm going to log off and try to get back on. These are some recommended readings that I have. This grass-fed cattle book by Julius Reuschel, I never bought for years because I thought the cover was just like, I was like, this is not going to be a good book. It's incredible. It's great. It's a really good book to help you figure out the mechanics of your actual grazing program, like fencing and water stuff. We're going to talk about that all next week, but we can never cover all the options, opinions, because we're matching your land to your resources. I have the Sarah Flax book right here. The you can't see it. The Art and Science of Grazing. It's awesome. The Jody Butterfield book is good. And if you're online, Greg Judy is basically the best grazer in the world, in my opinion. Jim Garish is a close second. And then Joel Stoughton's where I got my start down in Virginia, talking to him. And that's why I'm farming now. So what I'm going to do real quick, everybody, is I'm going to log off and log back on and see if I can hear you. Okay, so I'm going to take a quick 3 or 4 minute break and I shall return. Courtney, you okay if I try that?
Of course.
Hear you anyway. So I'm actually not sure how to log off here.
If you go to leave, it might tell you to like make someone the host.
All right, take a break. I'll be right back. Okay, I'm back. Courtney, can you hear me and talk to me?
I can hear you. Can you hear me?
Ah, I got it. It's working now. Okay.
Hooray.
Hey, I don't know what is going on, guys. Really sorry about that. Okay, I'm gonna run to the bathroom. We'll have another. I'm just gonna let this break end up, and I will be right back.
You're still muted, Jason.
Courtney is my right-hand woman. She's the best. Thank you. This is typically an hour and a half presentation, so we're right on schedule for question and answers typically. But let's get right into it. Does anybody have anything? Oh, Carrie, you want to talk about winter paddocks, right? So
Yeah.
I realize this is on the next week's, but let's talk about it now. Winter is not a growing season. We don't have anything going on. That doesn't mean the grass is dead. If you were to go out there last week when we had snow and even now and dig through there, there's green grass growing. There are voles, there's moles, there's a ton of life under the snow in the ground in the winter. But the grass is not growing because there's not enough light. We don't have enough energy to grow it. So it's a non-productive season. So your rotation probably should stop. Now, I've got only 3 or 4 cattle on 100 acres. That's okay because they're not going to be able to do much damage. But if I had a whole herd of like 50 cattle and they were out there in the early spring when the green up's beginning, like next week or two, they're going to go out there and that's all they want is that green stuff. This is when all the poisonings start around here, especially with goats, because they see that first bit of green and they go crazy for it. And it might be rhododendron or something else weird growing out there, or cherry. And horses too, actually, this happens a lot. We'll pick up some of that stuff and we'll founder, and it's not nice. So my point is that animals are dying for something green come the spring, and they are drawn to it. If those 50 cattle are out there taking a bite every day of that growing pasture, they will send it back big time, because when it's weak like that, it's not going to grow back as well. So what you got to do is make a sacrifice paddock. And I also recommend that this moves every year. It's winter though. So what does that mean? It means you need to have access to the cattle no matter what the weather. Keep that in mind. You may want to put them in the way back where the pasture's really crappy, where you need to improve it. But what are you going to do when there's 2 feet of snow? How are you going to get the hay there? How are you going to water those animals? So what you need is a place that's conducive to easy feeding and easy watering. Now, on my farm, that is a place that's very far away when I want to improve pasture. So it's about 100 yards from a stream, and I can use a trash pump, a gas-powered pump, to pump water and water them. Only in the winter though, because obviously I have to drain the lines every day, or those will freeze. I stack all my hay out there. So all the hay I buy 50 round bales. I have the truck drive it, and we put it back there in those back fields. What I do is there's 2 things you can do, Scary and everybody. So one can be a simple sacrifice paddock. Let's say you have 10 cattle, it's 2 or 3 acres. You're going to pick up a bale, you're going to put it in that area for the whole winter. It stays there. The animals are going to ruin that area. They're going to pug the hell out of it. It's going to be so full of manure and hay that they cannot absorb that kind of nutrients. The pasture needs time to be able to accept the nutrients and then to spit it back out. That's the recovery period. You should not be back to that place for at least a year, ideally 2 if possible. And that will renovate that pasture incredibly. If those 2 or 3 acres will look amazing in 3 years. But the trick is to really disturb it and then don't come back for a while. The other option in winter, which I also do, depending on the number of cattle I have, is to stockpile graze them with hay. Stockpiled is basically standing forage or standing hay. We'll talk about it some more, but come August 1st, I stop grazing certain parts of my farm. Remember, I have a lot of acres. So I have 120 acres. So I'll take 20 acres out and not touch that after August. That will continue to grow those cool season grasses, because we know the summer slumps over. Now our cool season grasses, that's why you see the orchard grass and the legume stuff really come back hard September, October, because it's nice and cool again. They're going to grow. What that allows me to do is, when I run out of grass in the other parts of the farm and the growing season's over come November, I can start rotating them across that standing hay and they can eat that. And again, it's not vegetative, is it? We let it overgrow. It's definitely what some farmers would call rank, but it's not. It's perfectly nutritious. It's perfectly fine. Animals do great on that stuff. It's more natural for them. What are the deer eating out there? They're eating that older forage. It's perfectly nutritive for them, and it matches their goals to the end. So, sorry. What I will do at that time is, if I am rotating, let's say I have 10 acres and only 10 cows, and I'm going to let them improve this pasture a little bit slower, I will set the bales of hay along that 10 acres and then wire them off. So, the first month they'll have stockpile and they'll have a bale of hay. They can eat both. And so when they run out of that stockpile, they'll start eating hay. When that hay is gone, I move them up the ladder to the next one and eat the hay bale there. That just distributes the pressure and the manure and the disturbance a little more, and allows me to probably come back to those pastures in the springtime as improved pastures, but not renovated. So I guess I never thought of it, but that would be my stance on it. If you're trying to renovate pastures, you should do straight sacrifice, like really hit it hard and give it a year off at least. Remember, you can't come back there next year. If your goal, and when we talk about next week, your goals is to improve pasture, but not necessarily renovate, then I think your best winter strategy would be to add those bales out there and graze them across the stockpile and hay. Carrie, does that make sense?
Yeah, it does make sense.
Do you have any more questions about that?
I think there's a lot more to learn, but that's great for now. Yeah,
Okay.
we didn't have like a strategy this winter, and we sort of just realized that there may be like some impacts from the way
Injury.
that we grazed them this winter or fed them and where we kept them. So
now you're gonna have to maybe skip over some of those places to let it recover. Is that correct?
yeah, I think so. I think we need to get them out of where they are ASAP now before the grass starts coming up, because they're gonna like really set it back, it sounds like.
Yes, if they're on your best pastures, they should not be there, definitely.
Yeah, that's exactly where they are.
The small acreage that you have. What else was I gonna say? Water is a huge thing in winter. Again, we'll talk about water next week and strategies for it. Oh, what I was gonna say is another integral aspect of where you are for the winter is windbreaks. So cattle are fine in the winter. Heat is far more detrimental to them than cold. It'll be -10. Remember, the thickest skin on your body is 1/16 of an inch. Does anybody know where it is? Not your butt. A lot of people say that. It's the bottoms of your feet, 1/16 of an inch. The entire cow has a 1/4 inch of skin. The entire cow has a layer of fat. The entire cow has, I can't remember what it's called, pylori muscles that raise the hair to trap air. We've lost that, obviously, but we still get goosebumps. Their legs are different than ours. They're kind of made for cold weather, especially ones that are more from European breeds and continental breeds from that side, not the Bos Taurus, not the Indian breeds. But those cattle are well equipped for winter. They're not well equipped for summer heat. And we'll talk more about that. My point is, cattle can be very cold. Cattle can sometimes be wet, but they can never be cold and wet. That's what causes problems. Cattle do terrible in structures. They do not need a barn. They do not need anything enclosed in. It's a terrible thing for them. They breathe. That's a great breeding ground for respiratory illness. Cattle need to have a lot of air, and they need to be out of the wind in the winter. That's what they really need. So for a few years, in my winter spot, I literally built a giant windbreak that was like 16 feet high, 3-sided, that all the cattle could get in if they wanted. They never used it once in 2 years, not once, because they weren't that cold. And they knew better than me where the wind was. They would get down in these little hollows when it was really, really cold. I mean cold, I mean -10 Fahrenheit. Before that, it'll be -5, and they'll be on the top of the hill in the wind grazing. They know where to go. So your winter area needs to have a windbreak, period. You can do it out of hay. Some people will build big hay ones. As long as they can get away from that wind. I use trees now. So that's how I handle winter. What else do you guys want to talk about while we're here on our theoretical stuff today?
I have a question for you.
I'm ready.
So I, like I said, have horses, and I have a relatively small property. It's like 12 acres. Right now I have 2 pastures, and I only have 2 horses, so I don't have a lot of horses, but I have 2 pastures. It's each a little over, like roughly about an acre each, maybe a little more. And I also have a dry lot, and then I also have a dry lot for them. So in the spring, like now when it's really mucky, I keep them off the pastures entirely. When it's frozen, I do what you say, like I throw hay out all over the place so I get like nice coverage. Couple questions for you. One is like, what's the best strategy for 2 small pastures like that? Because I don't think I'm optimally moving them between the 2, like in terms of time. So that's one question. My second question is it so because I have a small pasture or relatively small pastures, and because they're on them a lot, I clean them. Like I'll go through and muck everything. So I try not to leave a lot of waste, just because I feel like it kind of burns and whatever. But maybe that's not the best strategy. I don't know.
Where are you taking all those nutrients? Where do they go?
I have a couple of manure piles, and I compost them and use them in my garden and stuff like that.
But you don't re-spread it back on the pasture?
I haven't.
That would be ideal. Ideal would be leaving them. You're on the right track, Andrew. Now you're thinking like a grazer here. This is good. These are good questions. So yes, wouldn't it be easier to let those animals leave the manure out there and let it deal with it, especially in that much space? My only question is though, horses tend to get a lot of dewormers. Is there a lot of chemicals in their manure?
So I don't automatically deworm. I get them, I get the worm counts done. The fecals done in the spring and the fall.
Yes.
I need to. Yeah.
Good. Okay. So then you may be a great candidate for that. Now, with these paddocks must be huge. You only have 2 of them, right? So you're switching back and forth. Honestly, it might not be worth to rotate if that's the system you had. With 2 animals, you know, they're probably eating like 20 pounds of forage a day each. You would literally have like a tiny little space for them, right? For 1 day of food. They're not going to like that as horses.
Well, the thing, I mean, the challenge with them is like the pastures are they're each a decent size. And I feel like with 2 of them, and if I can just figure out what the right rotational strategy is and like what the right kind of care and maintenance is, I feel like it would be good. But I end up hanging them all year round because I don't have the right grass. I don't have the right, you know, I haven't soil tested yet, and I know I need to do that. So I definitely will do that.
I suspect that you don't have enough recovery is what it really is. So if you really want to get serious about rotating those guys, you're going to need to section off, like, how big are the paddocks? How many acres each?
They're each a little over an acre, so they're not super big.
So
and I do have more property. Like I was going to put a third one in this spring. Once it dries out a little, I'll go out there and start.
So first off the bat, it may not be worth it to rotate for you, which is perfectly fine. We talked about in the beginning. If we were going to do some quick math on the napkin math, we could say, let's say each of your horses, because of their size, eats, I don't know, 50 pounds of forage a day. So we need to, and we want them to stay on that paddock for 4 days. So you need to split that acre into how much food you can estimate they eat in 4 days. And you can play with that. You can make it bigger or smaller. Again, we don't want them cleaning it all up. So probably what would work best for you would be splitting up that acre, letting them at it, moving them, and then probably mechanically clipping those pastures, you know, at the 9-inch mark. And then I think if you can wait enough time, if you can make enough paddocks between those few acres and, you know, give it 30-day rest, you would really need like 30 days rest. So if you can make 10 paddocks, then you would be in really good shape, I think, for getting a good grip on that, improving your pastures. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. 10, that would be so, okay. So
but next week, you're going to bring me a map and we're going to look at it. So we'll all check it out. So keep that in mind, everybody. Next week's homework is going to be a map. You're going to draw your fencing and your water system. If you don't have one, I'll provide you with a map. What else, guys? Theoretical stuff.
Is there a, I don't know how theoretical this is actually,
That's
but
all right. It doesn't have to be theoretical.
is there an ideal ratio of cattle to like decent pasture acreage?
That's usually a different question than I get because you actually use the words decent. Usually people just say pasture and I say, I have no idea what your pasture looks like.
Yeah, exactly. Like it could be crappy or amazing.
Generally 1 acre per cow or per cow calf would be ideal, but my land can't handle that right now. I can tell you that right off the bat. So I would say, you know, 1 cow per 2 or 3 acres, depending on your pasture. There are ways to estimate it with this pasture stick that you have. So here's your first part of homework. Everyone remembers, go to NRCS, call your NRCS office, introduce yourself, tell them who you are, the name of your farm. They'll put you in their file and ask them for a pasture stick. It's your federal money, so they will more than likely send you one in the mail. Next week, I'm going to show you a video on how to estimate the amount of forage in your grass. You're literally going to take the stick, stick it on the ground. It will tell you how many pounds of forage you have per acre. For someone like Andrea, that will allow us to make a little better calculations on how many, on how much room those horses need for 4 days to make sure they're covering the nutritional needs. Now, if you're feeding hay like Andrea is already out there, then you can kind of flub on a little bit because you can be like, well, I'm gonna leave it here for 4 days. I don't care if this meets your nutritional needs because I'm gonna meet it through hay, and then you're gonna poop it out and improve that pasture. So that can be a good way to do it, but there is definitely no set stocking rate. There's just calculations for it. As you get better and you move along too, there's gonna be animal unit days. There's all kinds of calculations you can do that are complex. Milton, M.A., what is it again? Sorry, but I forgot your name.
Milton Arthur, yes.
I was right. All right, Milton, what's up?
So, you know, I've been thinking about the weeds, and one issue I have is one weed is the horse nettle. You familiar with horse nettle?
I am.
Yeah. So I have a hard time controlling it. I mean,
let me ask you right off the bat, where does that grow typically?
Well, in all of my, no, in the upland pastures. Yep.
Is it dry or wet there?
It's dry. It's perfect. You know,
Okay.
it's dry. It's not wet. It's,
okay. Okay.
Yep.
Okay. Sorry. Keep going. I just want to get that out.
Yeah. So yeah, it's the good upland Marden soil, and you know, it's old pastures. They haven't plowed them for 40 years, you know, and it's probably came in with hay and it just keeps going. And so I mow it, and you know, I can control it, but I just can't get rid of it. And I can't spray it because we're certified organic. So so is there, what else?
Yeah.
Is anything?
Have you done your soil tests?
Yes.
And what are the pH is good?
Yeah, it's below 7, you know, it's 6.5, something like
That's
that.
great. That's really good. And the organic matter looks good.
Yeah, real high.
Okay. So what I would right off the bat recommend is that we have to make that land more conducive to the plants that you want to grow, but it sounds like you're pretty much already doing that. In that case, we may start thinking about a renovation tactic, which may be a severe disturbance and then coming back. Because if you have all the stuff already there and it looks good, then you may be a great candidate for an actual renovation. Is it possible to live with the horse nettle? Are you being too nitpicky about this plant?
It could be, you know, it's just, they're perfect. Otherwise, you know, the legumes and the grass, they're just perfect pastures. So
that nettle may be part of that perfection.
It might be a good thing because it is a deep rooted plant, right? Yep. So maybe it's doing some good stuff. And
yep,
it's
now it's starting to change your attitude a little bit about it. And that's what this is about. Changing those paradigms. Maybe this is part of my system not working against it, you know? It is poisonous though to horses, correct? Or,
yeah, they don't usually.
They don't mess with it.
No, and the cows never eat it. So it's,
my cattle eat nightshade all day long, eat the berries all winter. It's really weird. It's supposed to be poisonous, but I never noticed. So yeah, Milton, start thinking of it from that perspective. And then when we talk some more, we can actually look at, we can take some measurements of the density of it and see if we would actually classify it as a noxious weed at this point. Maybe it's just part of your rotation.
Yep, just something there.
Yeah, but you're on the right track because you know you have the organic matter correct, you have the pH correctly, you have the first steps taken care of. And I don't think blanket chemical control would help you anyway. Have you seeded the pasture at all with other types of plants?
Have I what?
Seeded it.
I frost seed with clover. Yeah.
Yeah, you know what might help is a really quick annual like that can and I haven't had really good luck with this, but it doesn't hurt and it's cheap. I used oats one year to try to shade out mugwort, and it worked pretty well because their oats grow so quickly and they shade out a lot of that stuff. And the slower growing grass and legumes that come up behind them aren't really shaded out because they grow so much slower. Then the oats die and they fall down and they create more organic matter, and the oats don't perpetuate because they're an annual. So something like that may be, or what even better, Milton, what we could do next year is maybe try a couple things. Maybe we plant some oats in one place, maybe we mow twice in one space, and maybe we leave it alone and see what happens. Because no one has the answers. We don't know. We don't even know this stuff, you know? Yeah. I smell you snake oil all day long and sell you fertilizer, seed, all kinds of stuff, but we don't know until we literally do some science, you know?
Yeah. So when I do mow the pastures, you know, a few times, 2 or 3 times a year, I do mow low though, because you have to mow low to get the horse nettle. And,
so that's a problem, right? So maybe you get that mow, maybe in another section, we get that mower up higher and see what happens. Because that horse nettle probably gets pretty high, doesn't it?
Well, as the year progresses,
you got to wait. Okay, so that's there it is right there. We're finding something right there. We need to mow that plant right before it goes to seed or right as it's making that seed, because that's going to deplete its reserves. This is how we do it. So we're going to let the grasses grow. We're going to frost seed. We're going to let everything come up, including the horse nettle. Then come like, I don't know what the horse nettle cycle is, like probably July when it's starting to make those little chestnut things. That's when we knock it down a couple of years in a row. That depletes those soil reserves for it and hurts that plant. What do you think of that?
Yeah, that's probably about what we do. I never have time to mow in the spring because I'm haying, so that doesn't happen.
But you do, but do you hay those pastures too?
Some of them, yeah. Some of them get a first cutting off and then I pasture. Some of them are always in pasture.
So that first cutting sets everybody back, including your grasses and legumes, right? So they're never going to be able to compete the horse nettle. So if we waited to delay that hay, I don't do any hay now to July. That has more to do with my ecological standpoint. Like I'm letting the birds live out there, and I hate hitting fawns with the tractor and stuff like that. But that may end up, if you can buy your hay this year, like we were talking about instead, and delay that mowing, then maybe you could make a dent in that horse nettle.
Organic hay, I don't know. That's going to be really expensive. If I could get that $15 bale hay, I'd buy everything, but
Well, normally I usually spend $45 a bale, maybe $50 a bale delivered, and I find that to be a really good deal. Are you not finding hay for that prices where you are?
I don't even know where I can get organic hay locally. You know, I'd have to
Oh,
get
you
it.
got to buy organic. Well, most hay is organic anyway, isn't it? You mean?
Well, no, certified. Certified.
Oh
It's got to
gosh,
be
how much does that
very.
cost? I don't even know.
I don't never bought it.
See, everybody's situation is so different. It's so interesting to talk about that. So, yeah, that would be ideal, is to delay that hang. That's really interesting, Milton. I appreciate that. Who haven't we heard from? Sarah or Ruddy Rock? What's up with you guys today? What's something you learned? Ruddy Rock or Sarah? Anybody? Something you learned today? You don't have some. Oh, there we go.
Oh,
You don't have to have your camera on, but
sorry about
what's,
that.
that's all right. What's something you learned today or would like to talk about from our theoretical standpoint of rotational grazing?
So we would love to incorporate cattle, but due to our size, we know that if we ever did, it would be like personal use.
Okay.
But thinking in terms of other animals, like incorporating this for pigs and chickens is more where we're coming from. Obviously there's, it's all applies. But I guess if you have anything that you would add, or more specifically, something that would be really different for those types of animals.
So we're going to talk about multi-species grazing in the next class, but let me ask you this right off the bat. What is your goal by doing this?
Well,
there's no right answer either. So
I guess we have a lot of goals. Water conservation, we have really good ground.
So wait, so you want to use multi-species grazing to conserve water on your land?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, because usually people say to me they want to grow animals to sell or they want to improve pasture.
We do. We are very interested in expanding largely on the pork side of things, but we are hoping to build up to that over a few years by being able to feed a lot on our property and cultivate some of the water systems that are very broken but very good where we have located.
We're going to talk a lot about water. I have an entire presentation on water. I have so much stuff we could never get through hours that we have, but we're going to talk a lot about that. So if water conservation is your main goal, yeah, that's I don't hear that very often. I'm not really prepared for that. There are really great. I also teach the Cornell 6-week pastured pig course, and I will tell you that pigs are really tough on pasture. I don't think pigs should pretty much ever be on pasture typically, unless they're there for extremely short amount of time, because they really denude pasture and they're really tough on it. But multi-species grazing can be great, but it's not a panacea. It's not going to fix your problems right off the bat. I have a really bad fly problem on my farm, and I don't know why. I suspect it has something to do with underground water. And for years, I built millions of birdhouses, which works pretty well. And then one year I followed, with 200 hens behind 70 cattle, because I heard that they would eat up the manure patties and eat the maggots out of there. It didn't work well, and I was really disappointed. So anyway, even though there is a succession that can work for you for your goals, but don't think just multi-species grazing is going to solve everything. Also, running animals together requires crazy fences. Everybody wants to do goats and cattle. So do I. I would love to do that, but the fencing needs of goats are so great that they're not going to stay with the cattle unless they're severely bonded to them, which is possible, but a different part of management. So what about multi-species graze? So you would run like what, chickens first or cow? Do you even know what order you do them in?
Our plan is to be starting with laying hens and more to help with some disturbance in some areas that we're going to be planting more perennial food situations. So we have a lot of fruit trees and shrubs that are going in this year. That's more where my experience comes from, building out spaces like that. So
cool.
I'm kind of almost turning some of the paddocks into partially forested areas for shade and
I got you. You're looking at it holistically.
We have a few ideas going on. We're going to be starting with chickens and hopefully moving very slowly into pork because of a lot of things you're talking about, fencing and infrastructure wise.
You should take the pasture pig course in the fall that we do. We'll set you up.
Yeah, that is a plan.
Did you buy your chickens already?
No.
Well, you better get on it because I heard a lot of them are sold out.
Yes, we were just last night beginning to place some of the orders. We're
Okay.
waiting to hear back if we got in. So
I also will tell you, and I actually just wrote an entire 3-page paper to somebody today. It's extremely difficult to make money off eggs. They're considered a loss leader in agriculture.
oh yeah. No, we're planning on eating them and
Okay, cool.
utilizing them for other things, but eggs are not a enterprise that we're really
good, because they're
hoping to
extremely
make money
difficult.
with.
An organic, a typical dozen eggs with depreciation and labor should cost about $9 a dozen from a small farm. Organic would be $12. So if you're not selling them for $9 and $12, you're losing money. Crazy concept to most people, but when you actually break it down, that's what it looks like. And it's a loss leader. It gets people in the door. So we with the multi-giant corporations and stuff. Milton, did you have something you want to say?
I had I was interested in the fly thing because that is my other problem is the heavy fly issues in the summer, and I hate it.
I do too. It's disgusting. So let me ask you, are you sure that you're at threshold level? So, I think threshold for face flies are 20 per face, and for horn flies on the body are 100 per cow per animal. So do you have more than 20 face flies per animal?
The face flies aren't so bad. Mostly the horn flies, the swarms,
Are you having more than do you see more than 100 on each animal?
I bet, yeah.
Yeah, okay, that's all right. I just want to make sure, because sometimes, and you're organic, but a lot of people just nuke those animals with chemicals, and what that does is it builds resistance in them, and it's got a real problem. Okay, so you have horn flies. So what we need to do is start talking. I'm less good with horn flies, but what we're going to do next week at Milton, I'll send you some links to IPM. Are you familiar with integrated pest management? Yeah.
Yes.
We'll start with the horn flies. An entomologist one's the one that taught me about the water. I don't know. So let me ask you this. Do you have like billions of fireflies in the summer?
We have certain areas have a lot of fireflies. Yeah.
And I think that is, so here's what I am coming to. The hidden water underground on my farm breeds a lot of slugs and snails, which is true. And the main food of fireflies is slugs and snails. That's why I have this incredible proliferation of fireflies in the summer. And that's also what's feeding my horn flies or my fly population, or helping them breed in some regard. Milton, do you have a way to disturb the patties after they're dropped on the ground? Like, what's your manure management structure look like? Are you now?
The only time they usually get disturbed is when I mow the weeds.
Yeah.
Because otherwise, I'm haying. I have 50 acres of pasture. It's almost, I don't have the time to get out in every pasture and do that. I know that would help, but
it may not be worth it in the long run too. But look, well, let's talk, you and I, because I've been dealing with this for years, and this is an advanced topic, and I have a lot to talk about. So we'll
good.
Straight on it, I promise.
Perfect.
Sarah, are you there?
I am here. Yes.
Oh, come on! Farming is family. That's what we're here for.
I know. Yeah. So, I just recently became the manager of a grass-fed beef farm in the Hudson Valley. We also Full Moon Farm in Gardner.
Oh, you just took over for Donald.
Yeah,
cool.
I did.
Awesome. And you took over for, I'm not kidding, the woman who passed away 2 years ago was the greatest rancher I've ever met in my life, and I can't remember her name.
Okay, so needless to say, I've got big shoes to fill, Yeah. And
her name is Nora.
Noreen.
Is Nora her name?
Noreen,
okay.
That's what it was.
Noreen.
She was kind of short. She was real tough and super.
And I never got to meet her.
I live in Gardner also, and I was walking down my road one day, and there was a giant snapping turtle. I mean, giant in the road. And I'm like standing there, and it was obvious like I was trying to get it, and I didn't know what to do. And she was driving by, and she pulled up in her Full Moon Farm truck, and she's like, I can help you. And she like totally whipped it. I don't even know how she did it, because
she's the first real cowboy I ever met, I think, was her.
Yeah,
great.
Awesome.
I have only heard that same thing from.
Yeah, really? That's cool.
I now drive the Full Moon truck. I'm now the person in the red truck. So I've heard.
So you do have some big shoes, but you must have a grazing background, correct?
Not really, to be honest.
What will we do for you?
I come from more of I grew up with horses. So sort of, horses on pasture. And then I went to school and studied small ruminants with a focus on like dairy mostly. And then I worked at OSU's dairy farm milking cows for 2 years. So, I'm not completely foreign to cows or cattle specifically. But
I'll come out maybe in the next week or two. I can come out and we can take a walk.
Yeah, that would be great. It would.
Ulster County people I can come see. Orange County people I could probably come see.
Yeah, because I was technically like co-managing with Donald.
Oh, really?
Yeah, and which was nice for me because it kind of gave me an opportunity to learn under him. And simultaneously with Paul, Paul's more old school, the owner, but
Mr. Colucci.
Mr. Colucci, yeah, like Paul Colucci he's a dude for sure. So
have you written up your grazing plan for the year yet?
No, and like that's the thing, like
next week
Paul doesn't do that, and
I'm here for all you guys. So once
and so that's really where I'm at is like I'm feeling a little overwhelmed, and like we're getting pigs in a month, piglets, and I've never raised pigs before. Yeah, and I'm very excited. I'm really looking forward to it.
You just missed our pig course like last week.
And you know what? I wanted to take it, but I waited too long to sign up.
I can send you the recording. We can talk later.
That would be great. And so actually the guy that's now co-managing with me is Mexican and has spent his entire life working with cattle. But
in very arid environments, which are very different than up here.
Yes. And it's been incredibly like I'm just getting information from all corners, from Donald, from Paul. I was working with Bud for a month before he left, and this new guy's name is Nano, so I'm getting it from all directions, and I'm trying to make it digestible for me.
We're going to digest it next week, and when we start writing it on paper is when we're going to have it easily digestible.
Okay. Yeah. And I it's been amazing, and I love going to work, but I have days where I feel a little like I'm like, oh, holy
That's
shit,
a good thing.
This is a lot.
That means you care. That's a good thing.
Yeah, absolutely.
Cool. I'm really glad you're there working with Sean and Paul, and I'll probably talk to them soon. So I'll be making fun of you in the near future.
Oh, great.
Milton, you're unmuted. Do you have something to say?
No, not right at the moment.
Oh, okay. Sorry, I thought you were unmuted.
Oh, I did wonder about Bud. What happened to Bud? He just greener pastures?
Yeah. I think losing your co-manager after so many years and doing it on your own has its own emotional
that was hard.
Trauma, And I really, really liked Bud. I really enjoyed working with him. I'm sad to see him go. Not that Donald wasn't cool, but Donald and Bud were, completely different. But yeah, I think it was just more of like he needed somewhere where he could really blossom. And I think there's, Paul Colucci's Paul Colucci, so.
Paul Colucci. All right. Is anybody else have any questions? I'm going to probably bring this to a close pretty soon because I'm tired of talking. It's a lot of talking for me, honestly. Courtney, you look like you got something to tell everybody.
Does anyone need a soil test done?
Ooh,
probably. Yep.
I'm in the office on Tuesdays and Thursdays. If you need to come get a kit and a probe, we can work that out. Otherwise, you're waiting on Jason, which might be a month.
But email me first, though. Yeah, because I don't live near the office. She lives right down the street. But I'm giving out I'm meeting 4 people at noon tomorrow. 2 for soil test, 2 for hay test. So just email me so I can make sure that there are probes, and Courtney or one of us can meet you at the office.
Oh, cool.
The packets and everything. So.
And you will probably want to get those in soon. I know last year they got backed up because everyone, as soon as it got nice, everyone wanted to do soil tests. So you probably want to do it, especially this weekend while it's cold and dry, opposed to snowy and cold.
So where would we pick those up at?
It's at our Kingston office in the Kingston Plaza with Hannaford and AutoZone, right by the throughway exit.
If you need to, too, you can print the stuff out at your house, and you don't have to do the probe. You can do a soil test. I can send you instructions to do it without the probe, but the probe is ideal if you're being serious.
What about Orange County? Where would be the
that is in Middletown, and will you please, Milton? I will email you tomorrow. I'm not sure if they have a probe there, but if they do, I will find out tomorrow, and they can meet you.
Okay, good.
That's a great idea, Courtney. Thank you.
No problem.
Yeah, so that's it. I'm tired. You guys have a lot to digest now, literally to ruminate on. But So do that. If you want to talk some more, you're welcome to email me, or I'll give you my cell phone number. You will be getting a large email on Monday. Tomorrow I'm out of the office all day. I'm so booked. Monday, I'll email you guys a bunch of resources and your homework, which is really simple. And it's an exercise to get your brain working and to figure out what's going to work holistically for your property. So have a great night. It's nice meeting you all. I can't wait to meet you all in person and to see your cattle. And if I know you well enough to make fun of you at some point as a farmer.
Thank you.
Talk to you soon.
Bye.
I